that is you to the conversation. So stay muted, otherwise it helps tone out background noise and helps us know who wants to talk next so that we can call on you. When you do talk, when we turn the floor over to you, remember that everybody loves to talk and tell stories, so we want to try to keep it down to a minimum, especially with our topic tonight being anxiety. It could easily be into one where we end up more complaining about the horror stories that have happened to us, because I'm sure we all have them. So instead, we want to focus on the things that we can actually impact and help each other with and change. So if you need to tell a story to highlight what your point, fine. Just try to remember we are not trying to bash or badger, but more positive. And then if you do have an issue with anything that's being said, both Cindy and I are open for you to reach out to either one of us via private messenger. So feel free to do that. And if you want to add to something on the conversation tonight that has to do with anxiety, but not necessarily what we're discussing right now, type that in the chat window and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can. So I think you guys have all been here before with the way that we've been doing this new system with the chat room open. So it should be fairly familiar, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Cindy's kind of running tonight, so I'm backup support on checking messages and that kind of thing. So.
And I just want to add to that, there is in the reactions section, there's a little thing down there. There's an emoji where you can raise your hand and it actually moves your position on the screen. I don't know if it's for everybody or just for the host, but it actually moves your position and it puts a little hand on your screen so that we know that there's something that you have a concern about. So tonight we're going to discuss anxiety and how it pertains to how it impacts us when we're taking our dogs to out in public, what to do, what we can do ourselves. And we're not talking, this isn't going to be a discussion about somebody having massive anxiety attacks and needing to deal with that in public. We're talking about like the everyday anxiety that, like, taking a new dog out, starting a new class, taking a puppy to someplace for the first time ever, getting a new dog, and starting training, or the first time you pull the in training tags off your dog. We're talking about those types of things, or access. The other one is access issues, being afraid of having access issues, especially after you've had an access issue, and dealing with the general public, because it can be challenging. It can be frustrating. I know, for example, when you go out in a crowded place, like I was yesterday, you get attention. You can't walk through anything anonymously because everybody wants to talk to you and your dog, and they want to see what's going on with you and your dog. And I'm fortunate, even when Nick says service dog all over him, he's got cords. And so the questions are more about his cords and him being a poodle than it has anything to do with him being a service dog. I hardly ever have anybody point and look at him and say, service dog. And oftentimes people don't realize he's a service dog, other than to say, oh, he's exceptionally well trained. And who doesn't want that? That should be boosting us up and making us feel good about our dogs. But that doesn't mean we don't get anxious about them, because I think as owner trainers, we have more of a tendency to see where we could improve and where our dogs could improve with their training. And sometimes we get pleasantly surprised. So one thing, what we've done in the past is we've had everybody put in their concerns and questions, maybe how to deal with things, how you deal with them. Why don't we have everybody put like a concern in about dealing with, that you might have with dealing with anxiety with access, and in the chat group, in the chat, and Penny can help me with that. So one of my issues this weekend was, I was at an air museum. It was a special day there. It was Memorial Day, but it was also open cockpit. So there was a lot of extra stuff going on. It wasn't just static airplanes and people. There were extra booths and extra people. And I got stopped a lot to look at Nick because he's a poodle, which is less bothersome to me than other things I might get stopped at about. But I was still nervous because I didn't know how he was going to do for the length of time we had him out, because it was the longest time he'd been out doing public access in a crowd. And he did awesome. He had to be on a bus twice, he had to walk around airplanes, he had to walk around crowds, he had to meet EMTs, fire, and county sheriff and CHP. And he did fine with all those uniform people. And I think that's another thing, anxiety wise, if you have issues with people in uniform, finding a way to approach them so that you can train your dog and yourself to, you know, take some deep breaths. This is okay. We're just going to go say hi and they're going to pat my dog. Because I actually, that's one of the things, one of the small groups I asked to pat my dog. Penny?
So we do two in the chat box. One of them is so really important places that we can't just get up and leave. So, you know, taking your dog into those places, such as hospitals. And I'll tell you right now, I put that one in there. So it's a common one I address with all of my clients that I work with, and me myself. Like, I don't really have an issue with anxiety, but for things like that,
being transported without being refused.
Right.
And I actually want to address that last part real quickly. One of the things we can do is when we do encounter people like paramedics, EMTs, fire, police, sheriff, the first responders, when we do encounter them in a situation that's not emergent. So we want, when, you know, it's kind of our responsibility in some ways to educate people when we can. I don't feel like we have to do it every single time we take the dog out. That's just not reasonable. You can't live your life that way. You don't have to respond to everybody's questions or concerns. But if you're out at an event like I was yesterday, and there's multiple agencies out there, it's reasonable to go up and talk to them. And if they don't know about service dogs, to maybe let them know, especially the EMTs. I just spoke with the EMTs for quite a while yesterday, and they let me have Nick sniff around the back of the ambulance. And I was talking to the paramedic, and I told her, you know, one of the things, if you have a service dog handler and there's a blood pressure issue, having the dog on the lap of the handler can help elevate or lower the blood pressure, stabilize the blood pressure depending on what's going on. And then the other thing that was going on was little kids were turning on the sirens and honking the horn and doing all kinds of stuff. So the dog was being socialized while I was chatting with the EMTs. So it was a really good encounter that way for Nick, and he was getting to kind of sniff and look around the ambulance. I wasn't worried about him getting in the ambulance. I'm pretty sure he'd get in the car, any vehicle I was in. But those are great opportunities to actually just talk one-on-one, because they'll share it with their coworkers, because the EMTs I spoke with didn't know anything about service dogs and transporting them.
I think that's really common as well. And I think that's why Patty wanted to add something to this, because she has a resource for us that I really heard her to talk about. But I think, you know, these all kind of go in common. you know, so hospitals. And then what was added to that was a comment from Lyra about when you have to have some kind of testing done where you can't have the dog right with you, or you can't see them or monitor them during that test. So those are all really important things that can cause us anxiety. And we all probably handle them a bit differently. So let's kind of try to break it down a little bit. I'm excited to hear more about Patty's take that she wanted to add for like the emergency services, and if you need to go in an ambulance and that kind of thing. That's something that I plan to train but have not done so yet. So I'm really curious. Can we turn it over to Patty for a few minutes?
Sure.
Yeah, the Judge Jack Roberts project, turn my volume off. I do it for free as part of the Little Rock Parrot Heads Club, because we do a lot of volunteer work. So this is part of my volunteering because this is my cause. And I've already gotten I've been asked by Pafford Ambulance Services here where I live. They've just taken over for MIMS, and they want me to come out and educate. I've sent them all of the ADA papers, some information regarding service animals with paramedics and other fire department. I've sent them the state laws as well. So you want to get the state laws for your state, not just the ADA. And then you also want to put a presentation together using the Microsoft slideshow thing. I forgot what it's called. But that's what I've used to put mine together. And I asked friends permission for photos. Everybody I knew said yes. And I used those in there. So it's dogs that I knew and what that I know they do, that I can use those dogs as examples to paramedics. So like a diabetic alert dog, or a cardiac alert dog, a seizure alert dog, psychiatric service dog, mobility service dog, you know, and how that dog can help them to maintain control of the situation by keeping it with its handler. Like, say, for example, Izzy lays on top of my legs, which calms me, but she's out of the way of the paramedics because they only need my arms and chest area. So she's down at my feet. She does that when I have my EEGs done too. So, I mean, the dog can be beneficial to them as well, not just you. And ignore the dog is what I always tell them. You know, and I tell them that if they have any problems, such as the dog comes after them, the dog growls at them, or puts any of them in danger, they have the right to refuse. It puts other people in danger. And legally, they do. And this is what the Disability Rights of Arkansas has explained to me. Cindy is the one that handles all that here. And she helped put this presentation together along with a friend who is an ADA employee in the state of Idaho, Cheryl Bloom. And she travels a lot to try and speak to DC people, congressmen, senators, conventions, everything. So I've learned a lot of what I know from Cheryl, you know, and she's corrected what I had in the presentation and reworded it to where it should be legally. So it's really helpful. And when you take them to a hospital and you have to do like the x-rays, like the person just meant, you can have the dog stay in the area where the person, the tech, handles the x-ray machine at, not in the x-ray room with you. You can have the dog sit and stay in that area. That's what I've learned.
Yes,
You know,
sometimes, not all hospitals allow
right,
that.
correct. Some
Actually
will,
been
some won't.
refused,
But you ask
But
first.
yeah, that's
I
my
always ask
go-to.
first. I
Well,
always
when
ask first.
I'll just say in California, when I've had x-rays done, they've allowed my dog to stay in the room with me. And I've had him go, and I've asked him, you know, they've had me put him on the other side from me, but they've kept him in the same room as me. And some hospitals will allow that as well, or x-ray facilities.
Each hospital has their own system,
Yeah.
but they can't deny it. The only place they're not allowed is the OR, a burn unit, and somewhere that has to be sterile. Those are the only three places, you know.
I've actually been denied, but I probably could have fought it if I tried harder. I just didn't. Their excuse was you had to have a second person that could manage the dog while you were undergoing the x-rays, because you couldn't not have managed the dog. And I was at an out of town hospital and I knew I could do the x-rays when I got home. It wasn't a life or death situation. So I challenged him on it, but you know, it was just easier to come home to have the people that I knew do the x-rays, because I knew they would be just fine with Azul laying in the corner.
And that's why if I'm getting a mammogram, I'll leave my dog at home. If I'm getting, you know, my yearly women's test done, I leave my dog at home. You know, x-rays, dog at home. But if it's an EEG, that's not going to be anything dangerous to the dog. So then I'll take my animal. Each person has their own preference, you know, and in all honesty, it's best to have a second person with you, because when you go in to have the x-ray or test or MRI, whatever, the dog can stay with that person in the waiting room.
A secondary handler or the tech?
Secondary handler, like your
Okay.
mother, your brother, your uncle, relative, friend. The dog can stay with them in the waiting room, is what I've been told by disability rights, you know, as long as the dog, you know.
That makes sense. Because I just don't see how you could legally control a dog while your head is stuck inside an MRI tube.
Right. And like say I admitted to the hospital, for example. My mother could come and bring my service dog in to visit when she visits, because if I can't get up and leave the room to take it to go potty, she has to get up and leave the room to take it to go potty.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I've learned from my mother. I have RNs in my family, 2 traveling nurses, 1 is steady and 1 retired. So I've had 4 RNs in my family. My mother's been an RN since I was a little girl. So I've learned a lot in that area from being behind the scenes and learning. My dad worked for Mayo Clinic, so I got to go back where people didn't because of it. So I've learned a little more than other people with the medical field, you know, and that's why I educate in the medical field as well as policemen and firefighters.
Well, any procedure where you have to be sedated, whether it's conscious sedation or unconscious sedation, or even if it's heavily drugged, you need a secondary handler.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you cannot legally maintain control of the dog. And that's something I see over and over in service dog groups that people just don't seem to understand. Yes, maybe the dog can go out back with you while you're going through recovery from the medications, but the dog can't be in the procedure for you with you. Like if you have to go get a colonoscopy, A, I wouldn't want my dog in the room.
No, I never took mine to my colonoscopy either.
And B, you know, you're unconscious, you couldn't manage it. So
yeah, I'm going for an MRI in a couple of weeks here, and it's sedation, so I have no intention of taking Guinness in there. Gary will hold Guinness.
yeah.
Why would you even consider taking your dog when you can't?
Well,
Even
one
though
time
the
time it could be an issue is, okay, what happened to me was I got T-boned on a bicycle. I was riding a bicycle about 20 miles an hour and I was T-boned, and I happened to be on a bike when this happened. So I didn't have a dog with me. But if at the time I was a service dog handler and I had a dog with me and I was in an emergency situation like that, and I was scooped off the road, say I was walking instead of on my bike, and I was scooped off the road and my dog was okay, and they transported the dog, but they realized I had a head injury, so they needed to put me through an MRI or abdominal pain, and they needed to do an MRI, and I didn't have a secondary handler, there would be an issue. That's the situation I see, I would think would be getting somebody, a secondary handler, family, friend, neighbor, whatever, there as quickly as possible, either to remove the dog and take it home, or to handle the dog while you're getting the procedure.
Right.
I
That
sent
may
you
not-
for the file that I had put together for my presentation, so that way she has it for everyone to use as a guide. Because you really got to watch how you word things in there. I've learned from Cheryl Bloom, because you want them to focus more on the laws
Mhm.
than anything. And the ADA is the primary, but you really also want to use the state laws, because the state laws are what cover the service dogs and handling, not the federal. So when you have a service dog and handling, you use the state laws, and not all states cover service dogs and handling. I think Oklahoma is one of them that doesn't. I know Louisiana does, Arkansas does, Missouri does. Not sure about Tennessee, and Texas does not.
There were 4 that didn't cover, and now there's only 3 because Michigan now does.
Yep, Michigan
And
does.
One that did
Cal-
not cover, but it does now.
And California only covers if you're actively training.
Mhm.
A lot
So,
of them do cover only active training.
yeah, and I have no issue with that. It's very easy to make an outing at actively training session, but going to the hospital is not necessarily one of those. Going to court is not necessarily one of those.
Right. I don't necessarily want to stop this discussion because I think it's important, but I do think that maybe we need to look at a specific training presentation. Patty, if you want to.
I think that would be awesome to have Patty.
From step 1 of going to your very first primary care provider appointment with your service dog or service dog in training. Step 2, what would be the next, and kind of working all the way through the medical field. And that would be very beneficial to lots of handlers.
Like, you can take them to the fire station and ask if you could just be around them so the dog could get used to them. And they, Conway Fire Department let me. I stayed out of the way. I didn't interrupt what they were doing. They continued on with what they were doing. I stood
Right.
out. I stood at the side of the truck as the truck's running the hoses to clean out the hoses, as they always do, standard. They're putting blocks of wood together and packing them into the truck for mounting for the wheels and stuff like that, or in case they needed it. Just doing anything and everything, giving the firemen a treat to hold their hand out, and get the dog used to them.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole bunch of things that we can do there to kind of help educate people. I just don't want to get stuck on that topic tonight.
Okay, Lyra's got a
Only
question.
Yeah,
topic.
Lyra's got a question.
Yep. Go ahead.
So Lyra, I'm asking you to unmute if you haven't already.
My bad. Yeah, I was just trying to add on to that it's the emergency situations that are the issue. You can't plan for, and not everyone has a secondary handler. Not everyone has a significant other or a friend or a family member that could, like come at the drop of a dime to come grab their dog or whatever. And like, I was in a car accident and had my service dog in the car with me. And after I went to the emergency room, I had to take them to an emergency vet to get evaluated. I was in a ride service car. Like, it wasn't even my own vehicle, so I had to get transportation from someone else. And anyways, I had to get imaging done from the car accident. And if it weren't for a nurse, offering to, hold my dog's leash, like, what you do in that situation, that's a big fear, is an emergency situation you can't plan for and not having help.
One thing I tell the officers when we speak to the state trooper cadets is we tell them, if you can, take the dog to the local vet, get it checked, and then let the handler know you're taking it to the vet so they don't freak out. They don't think it's dead. Just say, we're going to take your dog to the local vet and get it checked. We will bring it back to you. The dog will be okay. And take the dog. and get it checked if they can. If not, have someone else make sure the dog is okay for the owner, because then that takes that worry off of them. By
Yeah, well,
doing,
that would terrify me even more. Having some stranger like take my dog off somewhere where I don't know, and
well,
not
that's
know that
why,
they're not gonna like let them get off lead or drop the
that's why
lead.
they come and ask you, would you like us to take your dog to one of the local vets to be checked?
And I think that's kind of a case by case evaluation, does my dog appear to be healthy and fine? In which case, yeah, leave them with me and I'll get them there when I'm done. Is
Mhm.
my dog having something that may be a life or death issue? Please take them to an emergency vet
Yeah.
and save their life, So
Lyra,
it's kind of a case depending on what's going on.
right, and the
Can
other
I
side,
add something here?
just a second, Rhea. The other side of that is your dog is probably injured from being thrown around, no matter what kind of restraint you have in your car. If you have a crate,
Well, they were in the floorboard, and they were
but they're probably
basically they just hit their head on the dashboard,
that's something
but they were up. Yes, but they were up against it in the floor, so I mean,
there's
like,
they
yes,
especially if somebody else caused the accident, they should be checked out, especially if it's
Yeah.
a service dog, one way or another. And probably the smartest, safest ways, from a nurse's perspective, if it was a human, I'd be sending you to the hospital. If it or urgent care, if I was actually able to triage. If I wasn't able to triage, I'd say the emergency room.
I mean,
If
this
it was-
situation, I was in a ride to care transportation vehicle,
Right, but then
and
they
the
have
driver
insurance
crashed the
that's
car.
they have insurance that's responsible for covering your dog or replacing your dog. And so it's important to get the dog checked out. And then if
Yeah,
you
no,
have
they
to
didn't.
retire,
They refused.
if they have to retire because the dog is, for any reason, injured beyond ability to work or is just terrified of riding in vehicles now,
You would love to think that, but no, they refused to cover shit, and it was a whole ass mess. But their car insurance that they were insured under filed bankruptcy, and then
okay, well,
the
that's when you contact an attorney about their insurance, about
oh
the
no, I
insurance.
did,
Okay,
and the
but
state basically
that's how
took
you're
over.
that's what you're supposed to, that's how you're supposed to handle it. If it was with rideshare, if it was with Lyft or Uber, if
It was right to care.
if there should have been an insurance that covered you and your dog and all your hospital bills. When I got hit, that's how it worked. I had to sue the lady. And if I could have, I would have taken her house because I just got the maximum of what her car insurance was with a great attorney. So you have to be, there's times you just have to accept that I can't have my dog with me, but I have all these I have like 5 service people around me now. And that's about where we've got to be with that. But Rhea, what did you have to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say before I forgot, I don't know about elsewhere, but we have a group of, they call them Humane Trappers here, but they also do other things. And in a crisis for any dog, they will go get the dog for you and make sure that it gets either medical help, or if you're incapacitated, they will foster it for you and do whatever needs to be done to make sure that the dog is safe for you.
I personally, I can think of about 10 local contacts. Not all of them are in my phone. Most of them are in my Facebook, but I know them personally. And if I contacted them and said I needed them to pick Nick up somewhere because I was hurt and injured and they transported me to such and such hospital, one of them would show up. I may have to go through the entire list, but somebody would show up. And that's not including my family. That's just additional people. And it doesn't have to be somebody that you're really close to. It just has to be somebody that's going to get the dog safe. And Lyra,
someone you can trust.
yeah, Lyra.
And yeah, that I wouldn't trust. Like, as nice as that sounds, I wouldn't trust one of those people.
Well, if
And
I was in Portland, if I was,
what if your phone was lost in the accident, or or broken, and you didn't have any phone numbers, or you know
well,
what I mean?
there's always a way. They can always take your dog. I see posts on Facebook all the time about dogs and issues like this.
I'm
And-
talking about locking them up at the animal control. Like, that's terrifying.
Okay, well, I think we
Yeah,
need to
I
move
would
on to
have
the
a hard
next
time with that.
part of
Yeah.
this. Because really what you need to do is, I think have the dog transported to the vet. And it's as terrifying as it is, if you're in a car accident, your dog needs to be looked at, period.
Yeah.
I just want to say the other thing to do is, if you do have an access issue with healthcare, it's prudent to follow up, not necessarily specifically with the office, depending on how your healthcare is run. I have Kaiser, which is a major HMO in basically the West Coast and some other places. And I had an access issue with one of my doctors. And so I hemmed and hawed because I don't want to have a bad issue with this particular doctor. But I finally called about it, and it's being resolved. And I didn't have to go through the state. I didn't have to go through a bunch of hoops to get the issue resolved. They're going to be doing some education. The doctor's chief is going to be made aware of the situation, and the office in its entirety, if not the whole. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole region has to have service dog training, and they're going to take care of it. Their compliance officer is going to be involved in it, and I get to hear feedback on it. So don't be afraid to do that if there's an issue like that. And Lyra, you have your hand up again?
Oh, no, I don't think it went away after I put it up.
Okay. I don't know how to make it go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I need to go in the chat, and I don't know.
But I think it's important to recognize that we do have allies out there. It's not just the fact that we have laws. And if you do have an issue and you think it's going to be a recurring issue, it's reasonable to speak to somebody about it. A small mom and pop business that really starts getting pissy about a dog, I'm probably not going to interact with that business. Penny?
I was just gonna say, what you were saying with hospitals is also true for most businesses, whether it be a store chain or anyone that has a corporate office. If you try to reach out to your local store manager and don't get help or the support you need, working up the chain to the regional or district, or as far as you have to go up, will be a heck of a lot faster than reaching out to the state or your local DOJ. Wrong letters tonight.
I'm the one having word finding problems.
Yeah. Well, see, I have a dog client whose name is DOJ.
Okay.
So that's why when I meant to say DOJ, the G just came out.
I think my next dog is going to be CAT.
Yeah. But so always start local to wherever that place is. And I totally agree with you there. If it's a small mom and pop and it's not one that I really need to be at, I'm more likely just to not support them with my business as much as I try to support small business. If they really don't want my service dog there, I don't want their services. Now,
Exactly.
there could be some instances where there is only, they're the only one in town that provides a particular service and you need that service, and then you have to decide what causes more anxiety, trying to go without your dog or fighting for your rights to take your dog. And that's a personal choice as well. But I think that might be a great next leap in this conversation. I don't want to be here all night, and I know we got a late start, but is the, kind of addressing access issues
Mhm.
per se, and the anxiety that that causes us. We can't change the world and the fact that they don't reinforce the ADA laws, but how can we make that better for ourselves and the future service dog handlers that come after us?
Well, one thing that's really important to keep in mind is the ADA is a civil law. It is not a criminal law. And unless the state passes criminal laws to protect your service dog access rights, the police can't or won't do much. It's all driven by any issues that you have are driven by complaints to the state level or local level offices, or if it's if there's no state, or I'm sorry, if there's no state or local laws, it's driven to the federal offices of DOJ, and it's going to take forever if it gets addressed. If there's local laws or state laws that protect your access rights that are criminal laws, you can call the police. But if you're causing a fuss in the middle of a store and you've called the police, the store does have the right to exclude you from the store or trespass you. So how you handle the situation is just as important as the situation occurring, that they're denying you the access. Lyra, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah. I was just adding on to what you're saying right now.
So when you conduct yourself, you want to be as calm as possible. And we all know that in these situations, this is what really gets at our anxiety. It's like, my dog, I don't have to label it. It's labeled. He's well behaved. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. What do you mean you're denying me access? What do you mean you're not going to seat me in the inside when I want to sit inside because it's cold out, but you have outside seating? Or what do you mean I have to sit in the back room and nobody else is back there? No, that's not okay. There's times like we went out to lunch last week, a while ago, and they asked us when we were being seated, and I said, how many people do you have? And I said 2 and a service dog. And they actually, I don't mind them when they do this. If they ask how many we have, they put us off in a table. It was in the main room, but there was less traffic by where we were, and it was a booth. And it was nice. And the dog hid under the table like he was supposed to. And it was very easy to manage. Now, there are times if they start to put me in a seat where I don't like, I'll say, I'd rather sit over here. And unless they have a reason, generally most businesses will do that. But, you've got to figure out what's worth standing up for, what's not worth standing up for. The one thing that really irritates me and gets me upset is when they grab my dog. I've had that happen a couple times. Patty?
Yeah, one thing I have learned from a friend that had this experience in a restaurant. She went in with her service animal. They were going and saying, no, she couldn't have it, da, da, da. And she stayed there and ate her dinner, da, 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 and left. Well, she went to take that restaurant to court, but they told her because she stayed in the restaurant instead of getting up and leaving and then calling, police and filing charges, they couldn't take her to court. So if a restaurant denies you, just walk away, contact the law, file a report, and go from there, is what Major Smith told me here in Compton.
I mean, I don't see how you'd think you'd be able to sue for that if you got to stay. Like, you're not being denied if you're still able to stay.
If they serve you.
Stay, what it is,
Yeah.
Lyra, is instead of getting up and leaving, she decided to stay. If the lawyer said if she had gotten up to leave instead of staying there, she would have had a case.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't make her leave, like call the cops on her, escort her out. Like they did allow her to stay when she chose not to leave.
And that is what the DOJ told her, because she took this to the DOJ.
If she had been removed by the police, then she may have had, you know, if she was still choosing to stay. But it's definitely showing just, it's still discrimination. It doesn't mean it's,
Yeah.
if they refuse to, if she stayed and they refused to service, that's a different case.
And I was gonna say, there are some situations though where you have no choice but to file a lawsuit, no matter how much you try to be prepared and, you know, have law cards and printouts and everything else. I thought I was prepared, you know, when I went and stayed at a hotel, and the hotel charged me a pet fee and refused to refund it after I sent them links and everything, and it started ignoring all my emails and calls, wouldn't call me back for weeks until I threatened a lawsuit with a lawyer, and then they finally refunded the pet fee.
Well, it's cheaper to refund the pet fee than it is to go to court over
Yeah.
something like this. And usually they learn something, because
Yeah.
I had an issue with access with Nick. My apartment complex wouldn't give me an approval or denial letter for Nick. And it took 6 months to resolve, and reporting it to the state of California and not getting the approval letter from them. And then I got a retaliatory email about picking up dog poo, and it looked like it was only addressed to me. And but the state of California made the manager take an intensive disabilities course. And what I found out from the state was the apartment complex had hired some of the highest priced, most firms, one of the highest priced firms that it does really well countersuing against this kind of thing. And they pretty much said, nope, we're not even going to go there. She needs to, we need to issue the access, you know, the approval letter. So it can be an issue, but that's where things like the DOJ and the state agencies help you out. And don't be afraid to call them. Every time I've called the state of California, I've gotten a lot of help. And then there's also the statewide, Patty, do you know what that's called? The like in California, it's Disability Rights California. In Oregon, it's Disability Rights Oregon.
It's Disability Rights Arkansas, Disability Rights
So it's
Missouri, et cetera. And it
It
just
is
changes
disability
by the
rights,
state.
just change the state.
Mhm.
And they can be really helpful as well. I had to use
Some states, though, like Arkansas, for example, is no longer taking on service dog cases. So now we have to go to the DOJ for it. And the reason why is because of the funds. So some states have been cutting back, I've been told by my friends that work at the Arkansas Disability Rights Arkansas.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Penny real quick because she's, and let her lead around
Yep.
the next round.
I just wanted to point out real quickly that we should note that service dogs can be charged for a cleaning or a damage fee in a hotel or bed and breakfast or whatever. So that's where a lot of hotels will be their stickler, is they'll say it's a cleaning fee, and that it just automatically applies to all pets, which could include a service dog if it's a cleaning fee. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where if you call first and ask what their policy is, you can save yourself a lot of hassles with that, to see if they automatically charge a cleaning fee for any room that had a dog in, versus waiting until it's there.
I can't actually do that though.
Claire, I'm glad they refunded yours, because it sounds like they probably should have. And, you know, I think I would fight for that. But like when I take my service dog into a hotel room, I make sure he's not making a mess or damaging anything more than what a child would do.
the issue is they try claiming dog hair as the reason for the cleaning fee, and that it specifically states in the ADA that they cannot charge you a cleaning fee for normal wear and tear. Like it said something about pet hair, I know that.
Correct. And I mean,
Yeah.
typical dog hair would be a given. Dog hair all over the bed, might be an acceptable fee. That's
Or
going to be a
urine or something.
by state determination or lawyer by lawyer determination. But I just wanted to make sure that we pointed out that
Mine's
those
a husky
were
like
acceptable.
yours.
Yeah.
And
So,
huskies
so-
shed.
Lyra,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
if you take Luna anywhere, blow her out really, really well, comb her out really, really well, and pray. I fortunately never got hit with cleaning charges with Poe, and Nick travels by trailer. Well, he sleeps in a trailer now when we go anywhere.
And it doesn't really matter with a husky. I mean, I
No.
quite regularly. And yesterday we were in a restaurant and he happened to, just as we were like walking out, do a sneeze. And I noticed a big clump of fur hit the ground. So I just nonchalantly bent over and picked it up. It would have been right in their walkway. But instead of leaving it there, I cleaned it up. He doesn't routinely lose hair occasionally, but occasionally he is a husky. It can happen, and sneezes are not something you can train for.
Nope.
So, but I think it's
I have an industrial lint roller.
Okay, just real quick, I think Lulu had something to say. She's
Um,
got her hand up for a while.
Yeah, if you guys ever come to Maine and you have an access issue, don't try to contact anything that says disability, because there is none here.
Okay,
It's called the Maine Human Rights Commission.
okay, that's good to
where you
know.
want to contact. I don't know if other states have different words. Maine's just weird. I'll tell you that. Maine's just crazy. I also wanted to add, to ease my anxiety with hotels, I always video. I video everything in the hotel.
I was gonna say the
way,
same
yeah.
thing. Take pictures as you're leaving so that you have some photographic proof that your dog didn't shred the bed, didn't shed all over the place, didn't eat the chair, all of that.
That way, if they ever try to do anything, you have proof. And it's like,
And video is better than pictures because it actually shows that walking along with the timestamp and this is it, and now we're leaving. And versus
And
a
the pictures have a timestamp in them. You just have to know how to get at it.
But pictures can be staged and faked, whereas a video is more of a constant stream. So it shows like you're not skipping over a particular part that may have had damage. And, even before we traveled with service dogs, we've gone into hotel rooms and taken video or picture of damage that was in the room before we stayed there to be able to have that backup of, look, we're not getting accused of this. This was broken when we walked in. And, it makes even more sense to do that when you have a service dog, especially if you're in a place that you're not familiar with, a hotel or something you've never been in, things like that, just to safeguard yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
One to sue.
Videos and yeah,
Can I make
100%.
a quick suggestion? I keep an industrial strength lint roller. I want a lint roller of Guinness as well, not just stuff. And it helps a lot.
Yeah, but you don't know husky fluff. Guinness does not have husky fluff.
I do carry a lint roller with me everywhere. I keep one in my car along with the cheap roll of shipping tape, which works really well as well. Plus I have the board for Azul, but he sheds pretty much 11 and a half out of 12 months a year.
Oh, so you get a half a month, you get 2 weeks off because
Yeah, but they're not the same 2 weeks. It's a scattered day here and there throughout the year.
That's one of the reasons I didn't go.
Long-haired dogs and the short-haired dogs.
That's one of the reasons I went with a poodle, because they
Right.
don't shed.
After the husky, yeah, I needed a poodle, right?
So
Yeah,
we're getting a little off topic talking dog breeds here, but it's
Also,
important.
traveling with somebody also gives you a witness as well. So
Yes.
the buddy system, as we learned in the Girl Scouts.
But that's not always possible. I had to make a voyage up to Portland without my buddy, without a buddy, and stay in a hotel overnight. I'm hoping next time I have to go up to Portland, I have somebody to accompany me and we can make it a vacation instead of overnight. But it's important to, you know, be aware of these things and try and plan ahead for them as much as possible. It's not always possible, but the more you can prepare yourself and your dog for these things, the easier it is and the less anxiety you'll have as a handler. Because unfortunately, what happens is that anxiety, no matter how mild it is, travels down the leash. And when it travels down the leash, the dog picks it up. And we've all had dogs get super anxious at some point.
And I use that as when my dog did that, my trainer told me, use that as a signal to yourself to stop, do your deep breathing.
Mhm.
Once you get calm, that dog will be calm.
I have actually taught Nick that when I take a deep breath, that's a cue that he kind of needs to calm down. And I recommend that to all my students, Lyra. And Lyra, your paw is up.
Yes, I was saying to 100% to all of you, if you have an access issue, get pictures or video, because they will deny it, anything that you say happened, and they will fight you on it. And if you have to go to court over the issue, you will not have evidence. And such as me being denied access to my grandfather's funeral, actually being removed from my grandfather's funeral once they noticed that I had the dog after being there for a half hour. And I was smart and took a picture of their discriminatory sign on the door before they tried taking it down that said guide dogs only. And they tried to say that he couldn't be there because he wasn't a guide dog. No other service dogs were allowed, only guide dogs.
The post office says that too, but that's not what their policy is, supposedly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was removed and missed my grandfather's funeral. So I took them to court over it because I can't get that memory back. And, you know, I missed that important thing. And because of my photo of their sign and everything, and I did have someone with me, I did have a witness. Yeah, I did win the court case.
Good.
But I feel like the sign picture really helped.
Proof is always very important.
Mhm.
So we've covered, you know, hospitals, emergency things, riding in the ambulance, access issues to common places of accommodation like overnight stays, hotels, and anything. Is there any other particular type of business? So not specific business, but type of business.
I want to add one thing. Keep in mind that places like Walmart, Target, big box stores are going, especially Walmart, have cameras everywhere. So if there's an access issue, it's going to be caught on film, whether it's your film or their film. They may
And
not
ask for that immediately.
and ask for that immediately, ask for the manager immediately, and start going up the chain of command. Because, you know, I walked into to a store one day and I had the greeter grab my dog's mobility harness looking for a sign that said he was a service dog. Well, technically he was working, my dog was working, I was holding on to the mobility harness, and the fact that he had a mobility harness on, he really wasn't allowed to ask me even if my dog was a service dog, because it was obvious what he was there for. So keep that in mind. There are things that are stacked in your favor, but you don't want that tape. If you go into a store and you have an access issue, you don't want that surveillance tape, CCTV, to disappear, because it could disappear.
Yeah.
Most stores only hold on to them for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to vary from store to store, but whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours, they only have a limited amount of time. So if you don't request it right away, you could very easily lose it.
Or they say that they weren't recording at that time.
Usually they actually record over it. And Patty?
Walmart, when you call the cops have to check the videos automatically when you tell them that it's caught on video. And that's how the Conway PD and the Faulkner County Sheriff handle it here. Not all law enforcement do that though, unfortunately. And that's something we have to educate them in. That's the problem in some places. They don't think to look at that. So that's another obstacle.
Well, we've talked about common access issues. The other part of this that comes out with anxiety is dealing with the public, not shop owners, not businesses, not the hospital, not emergency access. Dealing with the public, the little kids running up going, doggy, 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 doggy. I watched a video that I wasn't real thrilled with, but I thought there was a teachable moment there, because I had a creepy lady come up to me. And what I learned from the video was give your dog a public name, like a piece of medical equipment. So I didn't really want to interact with her because she just kind of, she seemed harmless, but she seemed like the kind that was going to like latch on and you weren't going to get rid of. So she asked me what my dog's name was, and I told her Wheelchair. Nick didn't respond. And she's like, oh, Wheelchair. And it didn't dawn on her what I was telling her. It was just like, that's a weird name for a dog.
Yeah, when a parent goes and says, no, that dog's working, I automatically tell the parent, thank you.
I do too. I think that's important. And depending on what's going on, Nick has been a more skittish dog than Poe in a lot of ways. He had to go through a rougher puppyhood because of COVID. And our state's access rules during COVID for normal people, for people going out and about, basically we weren't allowed to. So he's been more skittish. So I have to really watch him. But if it's in the right situation, I will sometimes allow people to pet him. And I know that that's kind of one of those, it's up to the service dog handlers deal. But sometimes it's a good PR thing. And sometimes it's not good for the dog. And if it's not good for the dog, I'm not going to do it regardless. But I think it's important that we kind of educate, say thank you when people ask, even if we're going to say no, thanks, but asking, or thanks for asking, but not right now. Sometimes I have selective hearing when it comes to that stuff. I don't think that's a bad habit to learn. When it comes to service dog access issue, or, dealing with the public, I think it's more important to be paying attention to what your dog's doing. Penny?
I was just gonna agree with that mainly. I think it's important that when we can educate, we do educate, and we all, no matter how frequently it is, we all are gonna have days where we can't educate. But I think we also have to keep in mind, especially anxiety-wise, where, for me, I educate all the time. I don't mind. I'm a social person. I love to do it. Anytime we can, we stop and take the advantage. So for me, being in the mind frame that I don't want to educate somebody is a clear sign that I'm having more health issues than I'm maybe admitting I'm having that day. And it's a clear sign that maybe that breeder that's really rubbing me the wrong way probably isn't doing as much wrong as I think they're doing wrong, and they're just annoying me more so. So I have to kind of keep that in mind. And I mess up, I make mistakes. Was not that long ago, I almost swore at a breeder who kept interrupting me and messing with my dog and messing with me while we were trying to do our 5-minute job we had to do in the store. But typically I'm totally fine with the breeders in that store, petting Azul, loving on him, gushing on him. It's just, so Azul expects it. He's used to it. And so while that really annoyed me that one particular day it was bothering me, I have to realize that I'm off kilter and normally this kind of behavior wouldn't bother me. So are they breaking the law, or are they just annoying me because I feel rotten today, kind of thing? And I think we need to remind ourselves to evaluate that. Is this the same old problem I always have? Or is this something that might be brought on by whatever it is, pain or an extra anxiety attack? Or, you know, is it a reoccurring issue with a particular store or a particular person? And then you might need to worry about that more or take that one up the chain. Whereas in my particular case, it was more of a me issue than the person issue. So I just needed to get the heck out of the store and not be around anybody that was going to rub me the wrong way, because that's the mental state I was in that day. So I think we as handlers need to be able to evaluate that for ourselves.
And that's contrary to what I've had happen a few times, which is I've literally been followed around the store by customers. And the first time it happened, I was trying to get Nick to pick something up. He had missed a cue on picking something up. So I was trying to work with him on fixing this retrieval. And I kept getting followed around by a lady with a kid in the cart wanting her kid to pat my dog. It didn't help that we were in a pets friendly area, but it doesn't matter. I said no. The second one happened in a non-pet friendly area, and the guy followed me and he was recording me for no reason other than he wanted to. And I asked him to stop recording me, and he got belligerent with me. I wasn't rude or anything. I just said, please stop recording me. And then he got belligerent with me. And I said, this is my service dog. I asked you not to record. Well, and then he's continued being belligerent, turned around. There was a clerk there, told the clerk what was going on. And he asked the guy to stop. He still wouldn't stop. And I asked him to get the manager, and the manager showed up and the guy left. Or left the vicinity I was in, and the manager assured me if he was still in the store, he would be dealt with. So sometimes it's us, and sometimes it's the people that are around. I'm like Penny, I'm pretty social. I'd be more social if my dog was a little bit more, let me be friends with everybody, but he's pretty selective. He's not aggressive, he's just selective. And I'm okay with him being, not super social. In some ways it makes it easier. I don't ask him to like everybody. He just has to tolerate everybody, which is what we all have to do. But
I think 9 out of 10 times it probably is the public's doing something wrong or the employees doing something wrong. I think that we just tend to forget that some days it is just us. So just keep in mind that you do that self-evaluation. Are they really doing something wrong, or am I just in a rotten mood today, kind of thing?
And I know after the 10th time somebody says something to you, and it's 10 different people, the 11th person that comes around is going to be the one that is going to feel your frustration. It's like trigger stacking.
Totally
Trigger stacking. So then you got to go empty your bucket and do something to relax, get the dog out of there. It's frustrating, but 9 out of 10 people, actually probably more than that, probably 95% of the people we have encounters with just want to know more about service dogs. They don't intend to be rude. They don't intend to be, disingenuous. They don't mean, everybody was freaked out on yesterday because Nick had his shoes on. And they just thought that was the cutest thing, that he had his shoes on. And that's all I heard all day. It wasn't even comments to me. It was that he had his shoes on, he was a standard poodle, and he had cords. It was something along those lines all day. None of it was about service dogs, other than I was taking a picture and I asked him to move forward about 3 paces and sit again. And he did it. And I was like 10 feet. I was at the end of my leash from him. And he did all this. And I got a comment about, well, that took some time, about the training. And, it's that those are the kinds of things none of us mind hearing, because it's not identifying us necessarily as doing something, oh, you're different, you're weird or something. It's saying, oh, wow, look what they can achieve with their dog. And that's the kind of stuff I like to hear. I'm sure everybody likes the inevitable compliment of, I didn't even know there was a dog in here.
Lyra has her hand up.
I see that. Lyra, what's up? Lyra?
Mine's
Sorry.
been up for a while too, and she's done.
Yeah, I was saying I agree 100%. Like 95% of the interactions are going to be positive interactions, but obviously the ones that stand out the most are the bad experiences. But like, I'm an introvert. I have PTSD and I don't trust people, and I have sensory sensitivities, overstimulation issues from autism. So most of the time, I'm not going to want to educate people. And like, ideally, we should want to educate people, but not everybody's going to be able to. So like, highly recommend, if you have the money to, just getting a stack of those cheap law cards to that educate people about service dogs. And if someone asks you about them, just hand them a card. Say, sorry, I don't have time to chat right now. Hand them a card and keep walking. And then you're
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah,
I just want
and
to
then you're
say
not
that
being
that's why I
rude.
go out of my way to educate people when I can, because I know it doesn't bother me. And I try to always point out that not every service dog wants to take this kind of time, or not every handler wants to take this kind of time. So make sure you're, using your etiquette and asking first. And if they say no, accept it. If they don't answer you, and walk away, accept that as your no and move on, because not every handler wants to be that way.
And it's probably a good idea for every handler to carry cards like that. I know I usually carry cards with the ADA FAQ on it. But the other thing, we all have good days, we all have bad days, and we all just need to accept that. And, by the end of yesterday, I was running on empty and I needed to be fed. But it was totally worth what I needed to do was totally worth it. And, I got my happiness tank overfilling because I got to be around multiple things I loved. And you want to keep doing the stuff that you enjoy so that you make those situations where you have negative encounters not so negative. And, if you have like one bad encounter, there was a puppy German Shepherd yesterday that was, I'd say maybe 4 months old, that I personally would not have taken that dog to that event because I thought it was too young to be handling that much social input. But it was there and it was doing puppy stuff. It was wanting to play and bark. And I think they had it on a prong. It's like, no, okay, we're staying away from that dog. We're just staying away from it. And, a lot of our anxieties can be lessened by staying away from the things that either trigger us or the dog or both. And that can be hard. Or it can be easy depending on how you.
Yes, Patty had her hand up.
Okay, yes, Patty.
I had an experience one day in Walmart, and it was an off-duty officer. And I had Izzy, the veteran service dog, with me, and she was just beginning back then. I don't mind explaining things to the officer of what they do and the training we go through and stuff so they can better understand it for us. Because the officer he was paying attention to the dog as he was listening to me. And he noticed that she was watching behind me, and someone started to come up to me and she climbed on me to let me know they were coming up behind me. And he asked, what does that do for you? And I said, it keeps me from hauling off and knocking them because I have a reflex because of what I've been through. I will hit someone if they come up behind me and catch me off guard. And he's like, okay, gotcha. And he laughed, but he got my point. But I said, and I sure don't want to do that to you on duty. And he laughed. So you can teach them even when they're off duty.
Oh yeah. And I actually went over, like I said, I went over to all the emergency services, first responders, that were at the event yesterday. And it was Madera County Sheriff, the CHP, CAL FIRE, and the local ambulance service. And I talked to every one of them. The only one I didn't handle was the only one I didn't talk to was the canine officer that had the scent dog. The Schutzen dog was, or the, I don't know what they call, the police dog that does the takedowns. I don't know what they're calling it these days. That dog was locked in the truck because the officer said he was not friendly or unfriendly. So he was locked in the air-conditioned truck in his crate. And he was very nice and helpful, patted Nick. And I think, you know, one of the nice things about talking to the canine officers, which if they have their dogs out, I don't generally do, is they understand what handling a dog is about. Whether they agree with our methods of training or not, they understand on some level that we're dealing with the dog, we're dealing with public, and they understand that we want to get the dogs socialized so that the dog doesn't, you know, have a bad reaction if something happens. Because the other thing that can happen is if your dog guards you or protects you while you're lying on the ground and first responders can't get to you, is something bad can happen, really bad can happen to your dog. And none of us want that. So, you know, educating.
That's one of the reasons I suggest to first responders to get one of those loop things that the dog catchers
Dog
use
snares.
for, yes, for their safety. 'Cause
Yeah.
the dog's going to be scared.
I think we've come full circle in this chat. We started with EMS and ended on EMS.
Yes.
Can I make the comment
Let
I've been
me
trying to make
call
since
it
you
there.
asked the different stuff?
Yes.
Thank you. So I
didn't see
sent
your
it
hand
to you
come up.
twice on chat, but I haven't had it addressed yet. So I'll bring it up. Another thing that can cause anxiety, or maybe not, but it should, is because I see it a lot in service dog groups, and people say, oh, I can take my dog to church. Well, no, you can't unless you ask first. They aren't covered under the ADA, and it can create a real problem if you haven't asked permission, because they can refuse you. So it's always polite.
Protected under Title III in the ADA.
What do you mean?
Title III protects a church, allows them to refuse you because they're not like a normal everyday business, they're private.
And I found that if you're polite and you ask first, it's really hard for them to say no, but they can. And I
Right.
also think that if you want to, because I've had people say, oh, I take my dog to these mega churches, and we're talking 10,000 people at a service. I've never been to one of those, but I know they exist in places like Houston and Phoenix even. I would worry about the anxiety to the dog taking them to something like that. Emotions run pretty high. So, I mean, you can talk about human anxiety or dog anxiety. That can be a real hot topic, but I think that at times it needs to be addressed when we're in other groups and people are bringing things up, maybe to educate other service dog handlers a little bit on that.
Every time I've seen it come up, it's been addressed appropriately that you need to ask permission, because you can't go into an Islamic temple and take your dog. You're not going to get permission. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, I've never seen that come up. That's good to know.
Because
Yeah,
they're not the same way about dogs that we are.
but people have to be respectful. You really do.
Yeah, and the more respectful you are, especially when you're having an access issue, the more respectful you are, the easier it is to resolve an access issue. I once had one when I took my Great Pyrenees. We went to Applebee's, I think, and there was a new host, and he refused to seat us because I had my Pyrenees, and he said she was too big to go under the table. And
Really?
I said, well, she fits in a booth just fine. And I said, may I speak with your manager? And so he had the manager come out, and the manager told him, yes, you have to seat the dog. You have to seat them with the dog. And she had her vest on, she had a vest on, she was working. So, sometimes it's just a little bit, but if I had just pushed it with that particular employee and not escalated it one step, it was a matter of educating him. He was young, he was new to the job. And he's not necessarily going to take my word for it that the dog is allowed in, but if the manager says yes, he can't deny it.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's what it is. And, you know, we all need to just do the best we can with what we've got. Sometimes we have more than others, but we'll all, you know, we can resolve a lot of the issues. And, you know, if we can make it easier for the next generation of handlers, that's what's going to make everything better. You know,
The
if
one
we-
thing that gave me hope, I saw probably a 4-year-old in Sprouts one day with Shasta, and her mother or his mother told him, "Oh, you should pet the dog." And this little kid, I couldn't believe, gave a 10-minute talk on why you shouldn't pet the service dog or bother the handler, and said it loud enough that everybody around us heard this whole thing. Said it better than I could have. And I'm looking at this kid with my mouth open going, wow. When he got done, I looked at his mother and said, thank you, and told me which preschool he goes to so I can thank them too. You know, because this kid educated everybody around us better than I could. He was like 4.
and
It's
you know,
amazing.
that's amazing. And the more he probably had somebody in preschool that has a service dog or knows about service dogs or had a speech on service dogs or therapy dogs, and they talked about service dogs.
Yep, it was amazing. Smart kid.
Yes.
Sometimes you just stand back and let someone else do it for you.
Yes. Lyra, do you have your hand up? I don't know if she has her hand up or not.
Sorry, it keeps I keep forgetting it's muted because you said to mute it in between talking.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I just kind of wanted to introduce a question to the group for
Okay.
like about this, and go around and see people's different answers of ways that they personally mitigate anxiety with their dog in public.
Oh, that's a good question. You want to start, Patty?
Yeah, with me, I pay attention to my dog's body language because that pretty much tells me that I'm having an anxiety attack. Because my dog will get anxious when I get anxious, even though I don't show it. So I'll stop, do some deep breathing like my therapist has told me to do and taught me to do. Think, and I'll focus on the dog's fur and how soft, and pet it behind its ears and just focus. And I'll do that for a couple minutes and my attack's gone. That's how I get over it. And so I'll use my dog's body language as a signal to me quietly that something's wrong with me. So that's what I do.
And you can escalate that to DPT if you needed to, but we weren't going to I want to just talk about like the typical anxiety we all get. And this is exactly what you addressed, is the typical anxieties that we get when we're out in public. And one of the things that I do is I have to watch Nick like a hawk, which is really draining for me because he's still young, he's still rambunctious, and he telecasts his anxieties or his intent to be to have an energy spurt is what I'll call it, or burst, or so I have to be hyper vigilant with him. And if I notice he's being really hyper vigilant to calm him down, I will slide my hand down the leash a little bit and make sure he knows you need to calm it down. And I'll start taking some deep breaths. And I usually say something to him like, not now, this isn't the time. And then as needed, we will exit the situation if that's what is needed. If I'm feeling anxious, it's generally just a matter of a few deep breaths and I'm good. But teaching Nick the cue about me taking a deep breath, it's taking a while, but he's getting it. And the other thing that calms him down is rubbing him behind his ears. He really likes that. And okay, so who's next? Do we want to go Penny, Rhea, or Lulu?
I can go and we can just go down through the thing. So for me, it's more of a, I don't know, and this may not help other people. It's just what worked for us. So I taught Azul a game when he was really young and being more easily distracted. And it's my basic positions game with hand targets. I've talked about it before. But so I originally used it to, to help me judge his ability to focus versus being distracted by the environment we were in. But it's kind of more or less become a fun, make us laugh kind of thing. And I noticed that if I'm starting to be more anxious or starting to struggle a little bit more in an environment, Azul will actually beg to play the game because the game does a couple of different things. For one, it helps us have some easy wins right away. So that boosts his thoughts of our outing. Plus it, boosts my happy thoughts because we're succeeding with hand target, head target, so rapid reinforcement for both of us. But for two, it's like with migraines being my issue, a lot of times my issues are more brain or neurological based. And it's like the dots aren't connecting, they're all misconnecting. So doing that particular game gives me a smaller piece of the puzzle to try to make those dots connect. And when those dots connect, all the other dots tend to fall in line. So it's a little bit different than the typical, do DPT or other things like that, which is, I'm glad that helps people. But if you're a person that it doesn't, think of something that's specific to you and your dog that you both really, really love doing together and incorporate that into your routine because it'll give you those kind of instant wins that kind of lifts your spirits. So you can use it if your dog's struggling with something or if you're struggling with it. Next. Would that be Patty? Do you have something else to add there, or did you already?
I think Patty went, and we need Rhea or Lulu to step up.
Rhea?
Second. Yeah. I do the behind the ear things now that I have a dog tall enough to do that with. My first trainer taught me that if you do it slow behind the ears, it's very calming for a dog. So I use that when I can. Sometimes just like tossing a treat so that he has to just move his focus can help too. Guinness has focus issues. Sometimes he'll focus too hard on something other than what he should be focusing on. So tossing a treat will distract that.
What about you when you're feeling anxious?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
He learned from Shasta and he comes and sits on my feet
That's a good one.
and leans into me. So he turns his back on me, which people find odd, but that's also watching out for me when he does that. He sits on my feet facing outward.
Hey, that's enough.
And so Lulu?
When I feel anxious in the store, Izzy usually guides me to wherever she sees there's less people. Like if there's one aisle and there's 10 people, she'll keep going until she finds an aisle that has like maybe 1 or 2 people. And then she'll do DPT.
Excuse me.
Sorry, dog feeding.
I don't know if she's ever gotten anxious in the store. Normally I pet behind her ears when we're standing in line because she hates standing in line.
Poe will literally stand between me and whatever. And the best example I have of that was we had a kind of scary encounter with the tiger. And we exited the area where the tiger was. The tiger was behind a fence, but Poe didn't like the tiger and the tiger didn't like Poe. And we left the area and we were standing watching some dolphins. And I was facing the dolphins and she turned around and she sat directly behind me, leaning against my legs, making sure I was safe so that I knew she was watching me, and stared at the exit where we had come from with the tigers.
Wow.
So she was what I almost never get anxious when I'm with Poe anywhere, because I just know that she's solid and she looks out for me before she looks out for herself.
Yeah, our wild animal park here doesn't allow service dogs.
Most of them
And-
don't. And that
This is open car, most of it, that's so they can say no.
any of it, they can say no to service dogs at zoos. It's one of the exceptions, because especially or they can limit you to certain areas of the zoo. Like the Oregon Zoo does not allow service dogs near the big cats, the monkeys. And I'm not sure if it was the alligator, the reptile house. There's 3 or 4 places you can't take your service dog there. And it's because of how the animals react. And that's a legitimate denial of access. You can't argue that. They can allow you to go through, they can say you can go here, here, and here. I would be shocked if SeaWorld allows too many black dogs, within 4 or 5 rows of the killer whales. Just because they look like seals.
Though Poe would have trouble at our wild animal park because they have 5 rescue tigers, and they're the San Diego Zoo uses them to test their new tracking equipment for their tigers in the wild, because they're the only wild animal park that physically interacts with tigers without barriers. And it's really cool to watch, but they have 5 tigers and they take them to play using naturally occurring behaviors with no barriers at all between the staff and the tigers. It's really cool to watch, but Poe would freak.
Would not be there.
Yeah. It's really interesting though that the San Diego Zoo said they're the only one they can do that because they don't have to sedate the tigers to put the tracking collars to test them on.
Yeah. Okay. Penny?
I was just gonna say, it is 11 o'clock, so we've been chatting an hour and a half and we are off topic, so it's probably a good time to stop recording.
Okay, hitting